Weirding Way Media.
Night, Mr. Walters.
You see that guy over there? Now he's an actor. The guy on the phone, he's a prize fighter. Me, I'm a cab driver. I'm the only cab driver in this place.
Good evening and welcome to Night, Mr. Walters, a taxi podcast. I'm HP, your co-host, and with me as always is my co-host, Father Malone. Father Malone, how are you?
HP, I'm excited for this episode because there is a return of leggy blonde in pantsuit.
Really? I didn't notice that. I can't wait to dig into the details. We are going over episode 2 of season 2 called Honor Thy Father. This was written by Les Charles and Glenn Charles, the Charles Boys.
No, not the Charles Boys.
Indeed.
Look out.
And it's directed by the one and only, what was the name he gave himself? The master director, what was it? The director in residence?
Resident director.
The resident director himself, James Burrows. Now, reminder, we are doing these shows in broadcast order and not in order of filming. We begin inside the garage. Louis is angrily yelling on the phone to somebody who's apparently stranded somewhere, that he's going to send somebody to pick him up. He tells Jeff to go to 45th in Lexington to pick up Jim Balvo is the person's name, which I love. They're so good at picking. It's got to be like somebody in craft services or an editor, but apparently this person, Jim Balvo, is stranded somewhere. And Louis hustles over to yell at, oh my God, it's Latka. Latka is back. It feels like we haven't seen Latka in the garage for probably 5 or 6 episodes going back to the first season. And there he is. Latka's back, Father Malone.
With a haircut. And that haircut emphasizes how deeply blue Andy Kaufman's eyes are, which is all I could watch for this entire scene.
I did notice something different. I didn't think of it in terms of a haircut, but you're right.
Everybody got a haircut on this show.
Yeah.
Except Nardo, who got more hair. And of course, as we mentioned in the last episode, Wheeler's hair has its own ecosystem at this point.
Wheeler's hair is like a chia pet. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's so thick and lustrous, right?
Wanted to never end. I want it to turn into like a coat that he wears.
Like a pelt.
Yeah.
Louis hustles over to yell at Latka, like I said. He upbraids Latka for sending out Jimbalvo with a broken gas gauge. And Louis incenses Latka so much that this is one of my favorite parts of the episode, by the way, because it's a callback to the Hollywood Calling episode. Latka demands to file a grievance. And in I wrote this, in a simply delightful carryover from last season, Louis tells Latka that the shop steward is none other than Ben Goretzky. Longtime listeners of Night Mr. Walters or viewers of Taxi will remember that Alex in Hollywood Calling demanded to talk to the shop steward. He was told that it's Ben Goretzky. You find out after some business that Ben has actually been dead for 2 years.
If any of our listeners are named Ben Goretzky, could you please get in touch with us? Because we will have you on the show. We will be giggling the entire time we're talking to you, but please get in touch with us. Ben Goretzky.
I need to talk to Ben Goretzky. Since Latka was clearly not around, like I said, for the Hollywood Calling episode from season 1, he's got no idea that Ben Goretzky is in fact dead. So he wanders the cab floor calling in vain over and over for Ben Goretzky, Ben Goretzky, Ben Goretzky, This is kind of odd. Louis insists that Goretzky is off today. Did you pick up on that? Do you think that was Louis misinforming Latka that Ben Goretzky is off? Or do you think maybe in this parallel universe, Ben Goretzky is actually, in fact, alive for season 2? That I thought was odd.
Who told us that Ben Goretzky was dead to begin with?
In Hollywood Calling?
Yeah.
I think it might have been Bobby. I'd have to go back and check my notes.
The hell does Bobby know? You know what? If you're to say any character's name, my response was going to be, what the hell does blank know? So...
Well, there you go. We'll leave it up to the viewer. Maybe Ben is alive. Maybe he's still dead. Who knows? But nevertheless, because the shop steward isn't around, Louis, and we know where this is going, Louis tells Latka that he has to report his grievance to the shift supervisor. And conveniently, this turns out to be Louis as well. Latka vents to Louis about how mean and cruel Louis is. to Louis, who insists that he did the right thing by telling him, but not before telling him to get his butt back to work. So it's a fairly inconsequential bit of comedy business, but it gets bonus points for me for resurrecting the character of Ben Goretzky. I love it. Just then, now I had trouble describing her. I alternately described this person as matronly
No.
or classy.
Sleek.
Sleek, that's a good
Elegant.
descriptor. An elegant woman comes in to the garage asking for the person in charge. And of course, Louis pops out of his cage. The woman asks for Alex Reiger. And oddly, I don't know if you picked up on this as well, Father Malone. Oddly, Louis somehow jumps to the conclusion that Alex has harassed this woman. Like he breaks into this thing like, oh, I tell you, these cabbies, I don't want them harassed. I thought it was weird because Alex is widely considered to be the most trustworthy of all the cabbies. I don't know why.
Oh, is he? Or do we, we only get so many episodes and so many glimpses into their lives. Perhaps this is not the first woman who's wandered in with a complaint. And what happened? Well, she was riding with Alex Reiger.
You think Alex was maybe going to those whorehouses with Louis when Louis was still a driver?
No, because those women wouldn't be complaining. I'm saying Alice is harassing his passengers.
It could be. I have trouble believing it, but who knows?
Oh, I don't believe it for one instance. Alex Reiger is a decent guy.
This woman tells Louis that Alex is, in fact, her brother. This prompts Banta to jump up and say, "You must be Alex's sister." I mean,
Boy,
what are we doing
since
here?
they got rid of Burns, now Banta's double the stupid.
Yeah, now Banta's double the dummy. There's no one else to give these dummy lines to, so they give him to Banta. And
It's
that's
me, Mickey. I've always been double the dummy.
I've always been the dummy. Elaine says that they didn't know that Alex had a sister. And the woman, who we'll find out her name is Charlotte Reiger, she says that Alex never really talked about his family. And at that point, Bobby stumbles. We're told that Bobby was in the can, and he stumbles out, and Tony introduces him to Charlotte. Now, a side note on this, I don't know if you picked up on this sartorial choice of Bobby's, but he's wearing a black satin jacket, a black shirt, and dark jeans. And to me, he looked like Michael Knight from Knight Rider because he's got the Hasselhoff hair, like the flowing kind of long hair.
Oh, Bobby.
Yeah, Bobby.
Oh, yeah. He looks ridiculous here. Absolutely.
What did you think I was talking about, Tony?
I thought you were talking about Banta for a second because I noticed Banta is prominently displaying his fucking keep on trucking tattoo in this episode. It's like so prominently there. And it just makes me wonder, okay, first of all, that's got to be Tony Danza's actual tattoo, right? He's got to keep on trucking tattoo. But let's imagine for a minute that Tony Banta is the one who went and got a keep on trucking tattoo. Now, does that mean that he likes the Grateful Dead? Or he's an R. Crumb fan? Or does it mean that he was just swept up in that moment when the whole nation wanted us just to keep on trucking, baby? Because the Eagles are on the radio. I've got my Blue Jean Society official outfit on.
The Canadian tuxedo?
Yeah.
I think that was probably a Vietnam tattoo. He wandered into some tattoo parlor in Saigon or somewhere, and in the book of designs, he saw the keep on trucking tattoo. Maybe he doesn't know, he had no connection to the Grateful Dead, but he's like, oh, that looks pretty funny. Give me that tattoo. That's kind of how I imagine it.
Maybe I'm going to continue with this scenario you're painting and say that Banta was on leave in Honolulu and was drunk, and a bunch of Navy boys, and he beat up a hippie on the island. Like some sort of flower child, like they just kicked the shit out of him. And then Banta couldn't stop talking about how much he hated psychedelic music. And when he passed out, they brought him to a tattoo parlor, and they got keep on trucking on him because they knew that the Grateful Dead were the real keep on trucking people.
I like this imaginary scenario of him being on leave in Honolulu.
And they meant it as a joke, like, haha, now you have to have this hippie tattoo on you for the rest of time. But now Banta, because he's a boxer, he uses that tattoo to punch his opponent. Like the fury of the tattoo works its way through his arm. Okay, I'm done.
Latka is introduced to Charlotte, and proceeds to lay some kind of aphorism on her about pretty ladies in his native tongue.
Oh, yes.
I really wish we knew what his nationality was, because I get annoyed with myself for having to say his native tongue. But whatever
Yeah.
it is, he's talking to her
Latka's gibberish. How about that?
in Latka's, but yeah, in his gibberish tongue. And to his shock, though, to Latka's shock, she responds in kind with the same language and carries on a conversation with him in his gibberish.
I like that she does it in an erudite manner. Like she doesn't resort to the usual sort of parroting of Andy Kaufman, the sort of highs and lows of it. She just kind of speaks the words, which I thought was in character.
Yeah, she's very smooth in her conversation with him. And she then explains to Elaine that she spent several years in Europe and is multilingual. And after Latka leaves, Charlotte says, talking about him, she says, he's an interesting person, but it's too bad his grammar is so poor, which is further selling this idea that she's, like you said, she's high class, she's intelligent, she's multilingual, she's a lot of things.
You know what she is, HP?
Yeah.
She's a polyglot, which is something who is multilingual would actually call themselves.
That's an interesting word. So she
That's my word for the day, everybody. Go ahead and look it up. Polyglot. Polygot.
That's just another word for multilingual then.
Yeah, but much more concise.
Okay, that's fair.
Multilingual. Yeah,
I don't know, whatever.
Get it. You spoke his language. We know you can speak different languages. Yes, I'm multilingual.
Like you said, she's very erudite. She has this air of superiority. She explains to the cabbies that she no longer lives in New York. She lives in the Hamptons.
Which is in New York, by the way.
I guess maybe New York's, Manhattan. I guess she doesn't spend.
It's just funny because she counters with, now, when I come to Manhattan, and I'm like, why didn't they just say Manhattan from the beginning? Like, you live in New York. Like, yeah, you all live in New York.
She's gotten away from Manhattan, and she's there for a fundraiser and gets called away by something. And she has to leave, but Elaine offers to take a message. She's looking for Alex. She's desperate to find Alex. So Elaine
HP, what was the
Yeah.
fundraiser for?
Oh, the fundraiser she says, it's for starving something. Like she doesn't even know. She just, she's very,
Her delivery is great.
she's above it all. The actress's name is Joan Hackett, who plays Charlotte Reiger. And there wasn't a ton of information I found on her, but she was nominated for an Oscar for a movie called Only When I Laugh, which was a Neil Simon picture. I think Marsha Mason was in it.
Absolutely. I saw that in the theater.
Did you really? Wow.
Yeah. My Grandmother Strikes Again.
Oh, interesting. I didn't see that, but I did see Brighton Beach Memoirs in the theater with Jonathan
I
Silverman.
also saw Brighton Beach Memoirs in the theater, but and Biloxi Blues.
I did too. That was a good movie. Matthew Broderick.
I also saw not Foul Play, but
Seems Like Old Times.
Old Times. Yeah, I saw that in the theater.
I did not see that, but I did see Foul Play in the theater. I was probably far too young. The thing I remember being so freaked out about was the albino killer in that. They gave him these contacts,
Scary.
He was a very spooky guy. And at the very end, during the climax at the Mikado, he gets shot and he's falling and he falls through like the rigging ropes and he kind of like gets caught and he's dead, but he's hanging
like a marionette.
Yeah. And it's freaky. This dead guy who's kind of hanging there limply. That made an impact on me as a child.
Doesn't the Pope love it? Like he starts applauding, like this is
the
greatest spectacle ever. And you know what? I agree with the Pope for once.
We're getting off topic, but this was Chevy Chase's star-making vehicle. He was fantastic in it.
He's
so
great.
Charismatic. And he and Goldie Hawn had chemistry for days. It was wonderful.
Here's a fun fact. Next time you watch the movie, Goldie Hawn goes to the movies at one point, even though this movie takes place in San Francisco. But when she goes to that movie theater, I used to work at that movie theater.
Was it the New Wilshire?
No, the New Wilshire has a sister theater, the much more famous New Art Theater, over on Santa Monica Boulevard, where I projected off and on during the 1990s.
It's a great movie. I loved Foul Play. But anyway, getting back to the episode at hand.
Must we?
We must. Charlotte tells Elaine and the rest of the cabbies that her and Alex's father had a heart attack. he's stable at New York Hospital, but she desperately wants Alex to have the opportunity to go visit his father in the hospital. And Elaine insists that, oh, we'll get him, he'll go over there right away. And Charlotte rather ominously kind of laughs and makes her way out of the garage. All the cabbies are fretting about telling Alex this awful news about his father having a heart attack. Alex, now I thought this was odd. Alex kind of cheerfully bops his way into the garage, ready to get his cab assignment. But what's interesting is normally when the cabbies come in from the outside, they come from a door that is basically like stage left from behind the cage, right?
Right.
Towards the
Yeah,
screen.
like customers come wandering in there too. So we got to figure that's the way to the street.
Yeah. But when Alex comes in, rubbing his hands, ready to start his day, he emerges from right by where the payphone is on the far left of the garage proper, almost as if he's coming from the bathroom or the tool room. Which
Right,
is
but there
weird.
is that giant sliding door there that to me says that there's even more sort of mechanic space and stuff back there. Because when you look at the building from the outside, there are definitely two levels, or three maybe, because we see cabs going up and down a ramp.
Yeah. I just thought it was
So,
weird because I'm so conditioned, like you said, when customers kind of come in, they come in through that front, I would call it the front door, but I don't know what the architecture actually is. He comes from the far left of the garage for whatever reason. Maybe he's emerging from the bathroom too. He comes in, he's excitedly asking Louis for his assignment so he can hit the road. And Nardo and Wheeler come over and give Alex the bad news about his dad and Charlotte coming to visit him. And Elaine gives him a note that Charlotte has written the father's room number at the hospital. And Alex, not missing a beat, takes the paper, crumples it up, and throws it away.
oh my God, he's being so heartless.
There's a tale to tell here.
Ugh,
So now the cabbies are trying to get him to say what's going on because this is very out of character.
absolutely. And they're a little confused too, because he looks a lot like an action figure here for some reason.
Is he wearing the red turtleneck with something over it, like a jacket?
No.
What was he wearing?
Not yet. He's wearing this sort of open jacket and the shirt. Oh yeah, I think there's a turtleneck underneath that, right?
Yeah.
It's weird, man. He looks plastic in this scene. It's like they just opened up the box for Reiger.
He's all about layers, right? He's rarely just like the last episode we saw, he was wearing the sort of Izod polo shirt, but he's always got like a turtleneck under a sport coat or a sport coat under this, or
So many
he's
layers. Alex
the
Reiger.
puffy vest he's always wearing.
He has a low body temperature, that
He
fella.
does. He gets belligerent when the cabbies continue to press him for more info on his dad. And he explains that he basically hasn't talked to his father in almost 30 years. Let me ask you, Father Malone, how old do you figure Alex Reiger is in 1975 during this episode? I pegged him at around 37 years old.
42.
You think he's a little older? Okay.
42.
He's certainly in his late 30s, early 40s, right?
Yeah.
Which means he probably hasn't talked to his dad since maybe he left home when he was 17 or 18 years old. That tracks, right?
Well, doesn't he? He says it, right? That I haven't talked to him in 30 years or something like that.
That's what I'm saying. But I'm imagining the circumstance behind that maybe he had just graduated, he got out of the house, he left,
Oh.
maybe didn't go to college after that. Maybe that's when he started driving a cab. Who knows?
Well, we know for certain that he didn't go to college in this episode. He says so.
Yeah.
Which I found shocking, honestly, because Rieger to me seems like the guy who in the early 60s was on a campus and was the total good student and went to philosophy class and smoked reefer with Donald Sutherland.
But just as possible in my mind is that he thought at that age, I'm smarter than these guys. What do I need to go to college to prove how smart I am for? I don't need that. So I can see him being, for lack of a better comparison, maybe something like a Cliff Clavin, somebody who thought he knew, he was an intellectual, but he's really not. Maybe he read a lot, and that's kind of where he picked up this air of intelligence.
Well, we're certainly seeing that he didn't go to college, but the conversation, we're jumping ahead, but why not?
Yeah.
The conversation he has with Charlotte, he seems to say it ruefully, like, no, you got to go to college. I didn't. Like, they paid for your college.
We fade to commercial. Now we're back it's another day at the garage. This was kind of unexpected and I wasn't sure where they were going to go with this. We cut inside. Now we see for the first time, I think, a second mechanic on the garage floor. It's this Puerto Rican guy who's kind of bopping around. He's singing very loud and exuberant in the garage, and Latka takes offense to this and starts to jabber at him and his gibberish. And eventually, these two guys are kind of arguing loudly with each other, both in languages that the other one cannot possibly understand. And then Louis comes in and he breaks it up, and that's all we see of this second mechanic until the bumper.
Here's what I have to say about that.
Yeah.
I thought, good for you, Charles Brothers. You figured out a new angle for Latka's gibberish, because we've kind of seen everything we can see. Whatever joy we get out of the gibberish now is the way it's being performed by Andy Kaufman, but the scenarios are always the same. It's the same sort of setup where he says something in his language or people don't understand him, but they kind of laugh about it, or, like he says something and then anyway, I thought this was a clever way to set up a new scenario for him to do this.
I don't disagree, and I actually kind of liked how it's wrapped up in the bumper. It made me think of something, and we'll talk about that. Alex comes in, and the cabbies all kind of rush over to apologize for when they got into it over his father and why isn't he going to go visit them. Another sartorial side note, in this scene, Elaine is wearing a blue blouse with red suspenders. Did you catch this outfit?
Did I catch it? It's the greatest outfit I've ever seen Elaine Nardo in. Jesus Christ, she's like a superhero.
You put a pair of roller skates on her and she would fit right in Santa Monica, just going up and down the boardwalk, loving life, maybe a headset on her head, listening to...
Yeah, Nardo needs to go west, man, looking like that.
Oh yeah, she's gorgeous. And but the other thing I noted, we talked about Bobby in the last episode, and in this one, Bobby is wearing a black Western style jersey. Did you notice this?
With white piping. It's
red piping. It's bright red piping. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, it's baggy and the piping seems like it's droopy, like somebody stitched it while they were really tired or drunk or something. It's off-putting. It's like I'm cashing in on this current cowboy craze that's going on in America, but not really.
You put some frills on that shirt and a cowboy hat, and maybe he could be in the Good Old Boys or something. I don't know. But it did seem, I mean, he went basically every single episode of season 1 with the classic Bobby outfit, the leather jacket, the shirt unbuttoned down to his navel, and a pair of jeans. They're changing it up a little bit in this second season, and I'm not sure I like it. I think it's a little off-putting. Alex is resisting all attempts at talking through the situation about his father. Even Louis tries in his own way to break through and have a conversation with Alex about this. Then Latka comes over. This is, I think Latka's had a few speeches like this in the last season, but I love this bit with Latka because I know what's coming, but it's all in the performance of Andy Kaufman.
Exactly what I said, right? How many times have we seen this exact fucking joke? A dozen times now, but it never gets old as long as he's committed to it. And he's
never gets old. He's always so committed to it. We've seen this. He comes over and he says, "In my country, we have a saying, your father, he may beat you. Your father, he may curse you. Your father, he may take your last bit of meat." And he just lets it hang. There's nothing after that. And Alex asks him to go on. To which Latka kind of innocently replies, "That's it? We know it's coming. We know that the punchline, it's an anti-punchline. There is no punchline. The whole point of it is how awful the men are in his country."
Worse, that you're supposed to accept it. Here's a little rhyme to remind you that that's going to happen and you should just deal with it.
So good. The way his timing, the way he lets it hang out there without any resolution until Alex speaks up. It's great. So at this point, Charlotte comes back to the garage, and again, she's asking Alex, can they go back to the hospital this afternoon? He refuses, but Charlotte says she'll change his mind. And she insists that she's not going to leave the garage unless he agrees. At that point, she suggests that they go chat somewhere private, and to which Elaine volunteers Latka's tool room, which we saw in the Mamba Gravis episode, right? We were wondering what this odd antechamber was. I think you're the
Yes.
one who said it was a tool room, so you were right. So they cut inside. It's a strange tableau when they come in because Latka has fallen asleep. We get the impression maybe he takes cat naps back there.
Oh, yeah. Of course he does. You had to deal with Louis De Palma, you'd find a nice place to curl up. And it has the benefit, and it's borne out here, where if you can manage to sleep in a position where you almost look like you're working, when you startle awake, it'll look like you just was messing up something.
That's a good point. Latka wakes up and he chatters with Charlotte and his gibberish, and she even corrects his pronunciation. She asks Latka to leave, and he says he'll grab his things. This is another great little bit. This signifies nothing in the episode, but he says he's going to pick up his things. So he goes over to the locker, which has Gravis in tape on the front. You think, oh, he's going to grab his lunch, maybe a thermos, and he's going to leave. But he goes in there, he picks up a few things. He goes to the desk, he picks up a few odds and ends, some tools. He stops before he even leaves the room to pick up like a paint can and something else. Like by the time he's
It's like
leaving,
the climax of The Jerk with Steve Martin. Oh, I need this. He just keeps accumulating things. He's like that little woman in Labyrinth, the one who has all the possessions on her back. That's what he's doing here.
he's saying nothing. He's just grabbing all of this stuff, and he just has a ridiculous number of items that he's accrued, and he leaves the room. We've been missing Latka this whole time. This only underscores how wonderful he is.
Let's get Latka an episode. Toot sweet.
Charlotte basically ends up begging Alex to go see his father. She relates this story. I thought this was a kind of a funny analogy. She tells this anecdote about their cat growing up, whose name was, of all things,
Scheherazade.
Scheherazade.
No, what's funny about that is she mentions Scheherazade, and then Alex has to remember that he has a cat named Scheherazade. Would you forget whenever you heard the word Scheherazade? Which, by the way, when do you hear that name ever? If you heard that word, you would immediately think, "Oh, my cat."
You would never hear that in casual conversation. The point of her story is that while Alex was away at camp, this cat got run over. And when he got home, he was distraught because this happened while he was gone, and he never had a chance to say goodbye to Scheherazade. She's trying to make this point of, well, if your father dies, you don't want to be regretting the fact that you didn't see him in the hospital.
Alex should have countered, you noticed when you said Scheherazade, I didn't remember what you were talking about.
What's kind of cool about the scene is that you're learning a lot of interesting little details about Alex's life that we haven't been privy to. And she asks Alex what their father could have done to make him so bitter. And Alex reveals that it sounds like the father left the family, left his wife, left his kids to
start a new one,
to start a new family. But Alex basically says that when he left, the family was on welfare while their father was making $350 a week. Now, here's another side note.
Uh-oh. What's it translate to? Tell me the modern number.
So this took a little while. So let's assume Alex was about 37 years old in this episode in 1979. So let's say the father left when he was about 11 years old, right?
Yeah.
So he's old enough to remember the trauma of this happening, but he's not so old that he could do something about it. So he's about 11 years old. So that means when the father left the family, it was around 1953. Okay. So according to the website amortization.org, adjusting for inflation, how much do you think $350 would be worth in 2024, Father Malone?
Oh, you're going for now. I thought you were going to go for what it would have been worth in 1979. $350 of 1950 what money?
$350 of 1953 money.
1953 money?
Yeah. How much is it worth? How much would it be worth in today's dollars?
$7,000.
Not quite so much, but it is a lot. Today, it would be worth $4,021.01.
That's a lot for a week.
It is. And if we work the math out even further, His father, Joe is his name, in today's money would be making the equivalent of $193,000 a year in today's money back then. So it's no wonder that Alex is so bitter, because this guy was rich by any measure in 1953.
Yeah.
And he left the family in high and dry and left a mother to raise her two kids alone. That's a very sad thing that we're learning. Alex goes on further. He talks about times when he would come home from school. His mother was, of course, working, and finding his father in the house with another woman. And Charlotte admits that she knew about this, and she was about 11 years old. And she says it's not easy to forget the indiscretions. But Alex counters it's easier for Charlotte because he goes on to make the case that she was his favorite. And this goes to what you were kind of saying.
Yes, it's exactly it. Like he kept taking care of her and neglecting him and his mother.
Alex makes a good point that it's easy for you to say you didn't have to deal with as harsh a reality as me, because he was taking care of you. He sent you to college. He took care of you in a way that he didn't take care of me or our mother. He even says that his father brought a date to their mother's funeral. But the weird detail of that is he's very upset because the woman came in something called toreador pants.
Toreador pants. It's so
Are they like capris? What are they?
Yeah, they're like capris, but they're kind of like they're split a little more up the side, and they're a little more hugging, and they're a little more racy. They're a little sexier. They shouldn't be worn to a funeral. It's very disrespectful. I'd be okay with it, but
I took his word for it, but I tried looking up toreador pants and I didn't really see what the big deal was. But
unless they're talking about actual toreador pants from, like what you would
like bullfighting?
put on a bullfighter. Yeah. I mean, even still, probably not the best look when ashes are being given to ashes and dust to dust.
It's a sad situation. And like I said, we've learned a lot about Alex and all of this. Like, he did not have a good childhood.
Can I just, before we move on to the next scene, you mentioned Joan Hackett being in that Only When I Laugh.
Yep.
Neil Simon thing. That's an okay movie. If you want to see Joan Hackett in a fucking great movie, check out The Last of Sheila. It's a murder mystery from the mid 1970s with James Coburn and Richard Benjamin and Paula Prentice. I think Paula Prentice is in it. Written by Stephen Sondheim and Anthony Perkins. This is not a musical. Anthony Perkins, yes. Norman Bates.
He was a fine director. I didn't know he was a writer, but he was a good director.
Oh, you should see, if you have not seen it, HP, Last of Sheila. Everyone
I have
within
not.
the sound of my voice, check this movie out. Okay. Anyway,
I
Joan
will
Hackett's
see it.
in it. She's great in it. You know who's in it? Ian McShane, Mr. Continental, Mr. John Wick.
He
Yes.
must have been like 12 years old.
Oh my God. Yes, he's like 20 something. He's so unlined but still tan. Like, he's amazing in it. Oh my God, what a great movie. Last of Sheila.
So it's like an Edward Albee play. They keep
sure
going
is,
back and
man.
forth. You'll go. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to let you not go. Well, here's all the bad. They're back and forth between Charlotte and Alex, and it gets kind of tiresome. Finally, Alex can't argue with her anymore, and he decides to go to the hospital. For the good of everything, he's going to finally go. And when they arrive at the hospital, they run into a woman who was there at the scene of Joe Reiger's heart attack. Her name in the show is Miss Stallworth. Did you get a good look at this woman?
Oh,
Father
yeah.
Malone?
Yeah. What about her?
Well, to me, she looked like she walked right out of the show Three's Company. She could have been like Jack Tripper's date of the week or whatever. She's wearing.
Absolutely. Who are you? I'm waiting for Jack.
Right. It's because they have her dressed in, it's all earth tones. She has like a rust colored blouse with kind of a brownish skirt. She just looked right out of, the Roper's apartment complex. There's something about her. She's sort of ditzy too. The word is that Miss Stallworth administered mouth to mouth on the father after he had his heart attack. Alex is pressing Miss Stallworth for details, and it turns out if we didn't already hate this guy Joe Reiger enough at this point, turns out that this dirty old man was goosing her at a train station. They were waiting for the train. The older Mr. Reiger goosed her. She screamed, and that scream caused him it shocked him and caused the heart attack. He collapsed at that point.
HP, in the last episode of Night, Mr. Walters, we discussed trench coats and the trope that is the masher. And I was reminded of that again in this episode, knowing that the elder Rieger is a masher, basically. He's the kind of guy who would grope a woman in public because that's what he's doing, right? You know what's funny about that character when you think about it? Like, I remember like cartoons where women going like, I'm a masher. Like at one point, this was just a hilarious like person. Like there's the milkman and there's the grocery store guy. Oh, and the masher. Sure. Like, as a society, we just accepted that there's going to be this random gross man out there, like over sexualizing himself and forcing himself on people. Like, that's cool.
Yeah, it's played for laughs, but it would not play for laughs nowadays, for sure. To me, like a trench coat in a sitcom is like Chekhov's gun. If it makes an appearance, it will become crucial to the plot in some way, shape, or form.
Certainly here on Taxi, that is the Chekhov's trench coat.
We're learning way too much about how despicable Alex and Charlotte's father is. They're really making a case for what a dirtbag this guy is. After they have this conversation, Alex insists that he wants to go in alone to confront his father and talk to his father. And reluctantly, he pads his way into the hospital room and he sees an old man there who's resting. And Alex proceeds to pour his heart out to this man who just listens without any interruption. By the way, the old man, I don't know if you know who this guy is. He's played by a man named Ian Wolfe. Were you familiar with him at all, Father Malone?
He seemed very familiar. I'm more familiar with Mr. Rieger, but this guy did seem familiar too.
Yeah, this gentleman was a character actor who has roles that go back to 1934. That's insane. Like,
Yeah.
but in this episode, he was probably already in his 70s. And he would go on. I think one of his last things he ever did was with Dick Tracy, the Warren Beatty movie in 1990. He was in that. So this guy, I think, worked until he was in his 90s. Incredible. He was also in Witness for the Prosecution, and he was in THX 1138, although I couldn't remember what he was or who he was in that. Alex tries to tell him about all the good things that he did as a father, but he can only come up with one ridiculous incident where Alex was so thirsty and the father brought him a glass of water with ice. He relates a time when his father forgot what grade he was in school. It just sounds, this is so depressing. Ultimately, Alex starts to break down, says, just having, regardless of all the bad stuff, just having his father in the world made all the difference to him. He breaks down finally and crying and goes to hug his father. And he says, damn it, you're my father. And he hugs this man. The man doesn't say anything or do anything. He just accepts the hug. And at that point, another old man in a hospital, Johnny, opens the door and kind of pads into the room. Alex kind of casually looks up and says, oh, hi, Dad. Vaudeville.
Fucking vaudeville. But at least it wasn't a quick verbal vaudeville. I think what I'm finding in this episode, it feels like the Charles brothers have recognized their own vaudevillianness and they're working against it in this particular episode.
They had their cake and ate it too. This preamble to the real father walking in and seeing this play out was a little bit of a bait and switch. This is supposed to be the big emotional climax of Alex and all the problems he's having with his father. But really all it is just a precursor to the joke of him having mistaken the wrong man as his father.
Love it.
The father is played by the amazing Jack Gilford, who is a veteran comic actor. He's got credits stretching back again to the 1930s.
1936.
Yeah.
Midnight Melodies. It's available on YouTube right now. Midnight Melodies, 1936. You can see that Jack Gilford was an impressionist.
Was he really? I'll have to watch that video.
Yeah, he does a good Rudy Valley.
He's such a familiar face. I'm sure he did. I have a memory of him doing maybe some commercials around that time. Even as a kid watching this show, I recognized Jack Gilford, not having watched Save the Tiger or Catch 22, which he was in. He was also in Caveman with Ringo
That's
Starr,
where
by
I
the
know
way.
him from.
Me
Caveman
too.
was on a loop on home box office when we were kids, and so I mainly know him, unfortunately, from Caveman. I gotta say, vying for that title around the same time as Holy Moses,
With Dudley Moore. That is a
the
terrible,
hilarious comedy.
oof, terrible. The thing about Jack Gilford, anybody who's seen him in anything, is he maybe has the most affable, friendly, sweetest old man disposition that you will ever run into in any form of entertainment. And now we're supposed to reconcile that with the fact that he's been an absentee father, neglectful at best. But yet when he walks in and you see him and the two of them, Alex and his father, start to talk, you can't help but kind of fall for this guy a little bit, right?
Yeah, okay, here's where I like this episode overall, but when you introduce Jack Gilford here in the late in the third act, it it says to me that we've now been cheated of an entire episode of seeing lovable Jack Gilford be a dick and get to see how he treats his son. Instead, we've gotten Charlotte, the sister we've never heard of, who occupies the majority of the episode when it should have been Jack Gilford charming everybody, but still maintaining what a cocksucker he is to Alex.
No, it's remarkable. Within 2 minutes of seeing this gentleman walk in, you see exactly why his father would be easy to forgive ultimately, because it's Jack Gilford. The man exudes geniality and humor. And all of this at once, it really disarms Alex when he finally realizes that it's his father there. But here's where I said earlier that the writers have their cake and they're eating it too in this, is we've seen this sort of schmaltzy embrace, tears flowing and histrionics when Alex is talking to this guy that he believes is his father. But now he's actually faced with his actual father, the man, he's right there. But there's nothing tearful. There's no hasty embrace. At the end of it all, after a few words spoken to each other civilly, they each kind of have a solemn so long. And
Great. I
that's
loved it.
it. I thought that was so brilliant.
I did too.
The button on it is, as Alex is leaving the room, the fake dad actually reaches out his arms like, "Hey, can you give me a hug before you go?" Because I think as a viewer, you're conditioned to hoping for the happy schmaltzy ending, and they give you that, but in actuality, it's all like a feint to the real climax to their particular story, which is there's nothing easy about it, but they can at least be civil with each other, and they're not going to adore each other immediately, even in the circumstance of having had a heart attack. Not that I didn't like the episode all that much. The episode's fine, but that to me elevated it, the writing, to a level that I hadn't really thought about until I rewatched it.
100%. This could have been a leftover episode of last season, given the premise, but the Charles brothers have sort of dragged us actually into the second season here with this ending.
For the first time in several episodes, we actually get a bumper for the end of this episode, which
right.
is it's a return of the Puerto Rican mechanic that Latka got into it with. They have another sort of conflict. They're starting to yell at each other in each other's language. And at this point, Tony rushes in, I think, at this point to try and break it up. But our man, Jeff, comes over the PA. And this I thought was funny. He yells into the PA, "It's quitting time." Do you think that's something that they do in this garage? Like they have, it's like
Never.
Fred Flintstone, Mr. Rockwell, like saying, "Yeah, it's quitting time," and everybody slides off the brontosaurus. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that would not be happening. The old people would be leaving and the new people would be arriving. There would be no need to announce anything ever. Like, by the way, everyone has a watch and they're all watching it.
It's a garage with an early and a late shift. Are they ever closed? There's always going to be someone leaving and coming, right?
Yeah, I'm going to chalk this up to they couldn't resist. They were so restrained with their vaudeville throughout the entire episode. They were just like, fucking hit him hard at the end here.
This is so vaudevillian. As soon as he goes over the PA and says it's quitting time, Immediately, Latka and this secondary mechanic kind of very cordially say, "Okay, we'll see you tomorrow," and they shake hands, and that's it. And that's the thing. Like the whole idea, to me, what it reminded me of was that cartoon about the sheepdog and the coyote who punch in every day. Hey,
Yeah.
Fred. Hey, Ralph.
Like beating
You
each
know,
other up and then the whistle blows. And I'm like, all right.
yeah, they're like, okay, let's pick this back up tomorrow. I thought that was, I mean, it is very shticky and vaudevillian, but it was funny. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, you just brought up a joke from the 50s that they're passing off in here in the late 1979. So yeah, it's a little bit much.
It's a little much.
A joke from a cartoon, I should add.
I think it's an apt comparison.
Oh, it's definitely an apt comparison, a little too apt because this is Taxi we're talking about here.
Yeah, yeah. That's the episode. That is Honor Thy Father. And as is our custom, we're going to rate this in terms of yellow lights.
What does a yellow light mean?
A reminder, we have a scale of 1 to 5 yellow lights. 5 yellow lights is the quintessential perfect episode of Taxi. And conversely, 1 yellow light is this is just an unmitigated disaster of an episode that I will never watch again. So, Father Malone, I'm going to throw it to you as I usually do. What do you give Honor Thy Father?
This might be a reaction to the previous episode, but I'm giving it 3 yellow lights. I think the writing in this episode was superior. All the performances really good. I liked Joan Hackett as Reiger's sister. I like that dynamic of working class guy and his sister who's like a socialite. And I just love the ending. I love that there's no reconciliation. Like you said, I mean, it is a bit of cake and eat it too, but you know what? Sometimes that happens in life. And that sort of catharsis that Reiger has about the dad, he would have had on his own anyway. It didn't, the dad needn't have been there. And that's only confirmed when he sees his dad on his feet. I don't know. It's a lot of complex television for a 22-minute sitcom, and bravo. Maybe I should give it 4 yellow lights. Jesus Christ, I'm talking myself into a higher rating. No, I'm going to stay with 3.
3 yellow lights is no disgrace. That is a, by definition, a better than average episode of Taxi. There's nothing to be ashamed of there.
You know what? It can't have 4 yellow lights because it's too not only Reiger centric, but Reiger centric with a bunch of peripheral characters who we're basically never going to see again.
I was conflicted coming into this as well, trying to think of how I was going to rate this, and I was also leaning towards 2 yellow lights. It just felt right, but then the more I thought about it, and like I said, I gave a lot of thought to that final scene with Reiger and his father and all of the complexity around that, which is, as you said, was kind of surprisingly deep for a vaudevillian 30 minutes. But the more I thought about it, the more I really appreciated the depth there. And that was enough for me to give it 3 yellow lights. I went up a grade, and I think this is a 3 feels much more apt. It's got some nice character shading of Reiger. It may be lacking a little bit in overall cabbie chemistry because they don't really feature all that much. But again, the final meeting between Alex and his father Joe is just written and played so well, and I applaud the fact that it is a little bit like a bait and switch. Like you think you've gotten the teary schmaltzy ending, but you really haven't. Jack Gilford is he's so good that, spoiler alert, he does come back to play Alex's father in a future episode. So there's some nice chemistry there too, I think, between him and Judd Hirsch. 3 yellow lights from Father Malone, 3 from myself. That will do it for this episode of Night, Mr. Walters. Father Malone, when you aren't clocked into the garage, where can folks find you?
You can find me over at weirdingwaymedia.com. I've got a couple of podcasts over there that you might enjoy, like Midnight Viewing, the horror anthology podcast where we review horror anthology television. Right now, working our way through Tales from the Dark Side. And this season, we've got lots of interviews with cast and the creators of the show, so you should check that out. I also do a half hour, well, it's a little longer than a half hour now. It's a radio drama that I write and produce called Dark Destinations. I should check that out. And I also have a Patreon. So just go to patreon.com/Father Malone. Go to any of those places, but especially the last one.
You can find myself in a lot of the same places as Father Malone. I'm also on the Weirding Way Network. You can also hear me in addition to doing some helping out a little bit on Dark Destinations, which I again encourage everybody. If you love audio drama and great storytelling, please check it out. I also do a music podcast called Noise Junkies with myself, Father Malone, and Mondo Heather's Heather Drain. So if you are a music nerd like we are, please check it out as well. Additionally, I have a Bandcamp site called hpmusicplace.bandcamp.com. Check that out if you so desire. Thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, rate us. We'd love to hear from you. So for myself and for Father Malone, thank you again, and we'll see you guys next time.